I hope you had a good break. We're going to start again with the last session of the day, which is starting by the Open Forum Part 2, which is these short presentations, 5-minute presentation without questions. The timing is a bit tight, so please keep that in mind, the speakers. I'm going to announce the next speaker before the previous talk so that we can move forward quickly. So first it's going to be Martina, welcome, and then it's going to be Jana, which can get ready.
So I'm presenting the latest outcome from the PAMIR project. So as you can see, here are the names of the PIs. And then I would really like to highlight actually the names of the coordinators. So that's Evan Miles and Thomas Sachs that managed this huge project and actually put an immense effort into reaching all the objectives, hopefully by the end of the year when the project ends. I'm just a collaborator of this. So I'm representing today PAMIR. I'm somehow involved in the activities, but not directly in the PI team or the coordinator team. So to start, a bit of background on the project. So the project is trying to improve the understanding of the changes of the cryosphere on the ecosystems, hazards, and the water resources in the PAMIR region. So the PAMIR region is a very heterogeneous region that had, until a few years ago, still some stable glaciers. But this is changing very rapidly, and the problem is that actually we have not so much measurements in this region. So a fundamental part of the project was to support systematic measurements in the region on a long term, but then also to fill the gaps with new fundamental observations. And so this means also that we have been a lot in the field. So the project includes 5 different clusters that are associated with the different colors, doing a lot of measurements in this region, so pretty much covering the entire region. And so this basically gave a lot of new data, but it also gave a lot of headaches, so it wasn't easy always to conclude all the measurements that we planned. And I would like to highlight now the most important achievements in the last year, and especially the ones that are going on right now. That's also why I'm here and not Evan presenting, basically, because he's right now in Dushanbe. So one of the first things that we wanted to do is to improve the meteorological observation network in the region. And we built 8 stations in the last 3-4 years across the entire PAMIR, and they range from 3,600 to 4,900 meters. Currently, there will be another one on Konkujubaji at 5,700 meters above sea level, so we have quite a nice range of different settings covered with those station networks, and this data is actually also transmitted directly here, so we can actually see what is going on almost in real time. So one last piece that is missing in this observation network is the Gorbanov station. So that's one of the oldest and longest record that we have for Asia. So it started in 1936, and it broke down with the breakdown of the Soviet Union. So the measurements were not continued. There have been several different efforts to re-establish the network in collaboration also with Tajik Hydromet, but it wasn't successful so far. So data has never been downloaded from the newly installed sensors in the past years. This is changing next week. So we have a team going there, maintaining the station, so with a lot of replacement sensors, and also they will download for the first time the data from the station. And then I think this is the kind of flagship of the flagship for PAMIR. So we were fighting a lot to have this ice core. It was planned for Vechenko Glacier. Today it's called Vanchiak Glacier, which was just not possible because of logistics and politics, I would say. So we changed the location, so to Konkujubaji ice cap. That's at the Chinese border, so pretty much at the border of the Karakorum PAMIR anomaly. And we are expecting actually really nice results from this core. There was an expedition last year to see how accessible it is, and it went very, very smooth. So no helicopter needed. That was one of the big problems that we had in the past. And then basically also access is easy and so on. So they are supposedly leaving Dushanbe on Monday to get there and drill. There's still some hiccups with permits, but fingers crossed it works. And so this it gives really promising data on the temperature, precipitation evolution of the past, and on the seasonality changes and so on. So for a region where we know very little of. It also actually shifted a bit with the collaboration because Margit Schikowski got retired in the meantime. So now there's a new partnership with a Japanese university, and also a huge support from the University of Bern with helping with infrastructure and equipment. Then another exciting measurement that should have taken place today. It's hopefully taking place tomorrow. Again, permit reasons. We have measured in the past a few glaciers for ice thickness with a low-frequency radar. But as the region is really remote and it's hard to access the glacier, we could do about 10 glaciers by foot to estimate a bit better the ice volume stored in this region. And now what we did is actually build this kind of a ladder with a radar at the bottom to fly on a large scale over the PAMIRs and measure the ice thickness for a better estimate of the ice volume that is actually stored in this region. So they should leave it, yeah, as I said, hopefully tomorrow. And then a last measurement that is a bit included into this cluster of glacier observation is the ice, the temperature measurements that we initiated last year with the first drilling at Sulmart to about 14 meters depth. We measured temperatures of -7 degrees, so quite cold. And this has been now completed with another 3 measurements of the ice temperature around the region, as you can see here for Yakarcha Glacier close to Dushanbe. Then another cluster is the permafrost network. So basically, when we started, there was no measurements at all in the PAMIRs of permafrost, or very, very little. And so we had in the past made about 32 geophysical surveys, and the first borehole was drilled last year. So we have now the ground temperature to a depth of 30 meters, and yes, and this year we completed another 10 observations throughout the region. One of this is Ishkashim, where we had no measurements at all, and this also gave us the location for a second borehole that will be drilled in October this year. And with this, I come to the last slide, because we have also quite a few activities that are not purely science related. So there was a lot of policy dialogue involved, with some involvement in conferences, but also on the adaptation side, we tried to motivate the different stakeholders to use early warning systems that were implemented, for example, for Baramos glacier. There was a lot of outreach activities and trainings for local scientists. So the outreach includes, for example, the children's book that was already mentioned this morning on the Swiss Polar Class. There also a huge support for Adventure of Science, which is a project that is, for me personally, very important. It supports female researchers in Central Asia. So also thanks a lot to the support there. And then there were the different trainings for the scientists, not just scientific trainings, but really also health and safety in the mountains, glacier safety, and so on, which is quite an important part of including this, the researchers into our field activities. And yes, with this, I come to the end. So yeah, I would like to thank all the collaborators also. It's a huge collaborative effort with local researchers and international partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Jana. And next one is going to be Lisa.
Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Jana Rüthers, and I'm a PhD student at ETH here in the Plant Ecology Group. And I'm also a member of the Arctic Greening Project. And today I would like to give you some first insights from our group members and also some of our goals. So basically, as a first introduction, the Arctic has been greening for the last decades. And while large-scale climatic drivers such as temperature or precipitation have been well studied, more local and small-scale processes have often been neglected. So our goal of the study, or what we assume, is that the pace and extent of Arctic greening is not only driven by climate and warming, but more by an interplay of, for example, soil development or plant-plant interactions, or also plant-microbe interactions that you can see here. And to test this, we conducted several field seasons in the high Arctic, in Svalbard, and in northern Norway. And to start with our group members from the soil resource team, so they basically look at all the mechanisms behind the soil carbon cycle. So they look at soil carbon input, stabilization processes, but also turnover dynamics. They dig for this several soil pits. As you can see in the picture, they bring back a lot of soil here to ETH and do their analysis. But they also try to develop an integrated model about plant, soil, and micro processes to better simulate the Arctic carbon cycling. Then we have our group members from the geobiology group. They look then on the smallest members of the soil, the microbiota and the fungi. And they could already show that soil fungi, for example, are linked to CO2 emissions, but also are very responsive to environmental changes, why it's super important to also look at the microbiota and fungi if you want to understand the Arctic carbon cycling. And myself, I look on the vegetation. So what we could show is that, for example, the shifts in the high Arctic of the vegetation are not only driven by climate factors, but also on a small scale of changing soil conditions, so of soil development and soil fertility. And what we could see is that the species composition is overlapping between nutrient-poor tundra soils and also nutrient-rich tundra soils, for example, on bird cliff meadows or in settlements, which tells us basically that these overlapping species, they are quite small and grow not a lot when they are in the nutrient-poor tundra, but as soon as the soil conditions improve, in the bird cliff meadows, for example, then they are much taller and produce much more biomass. And this basically tells us that as soon as soil conditions improve, not only on the bird cliffs, but for example now with climate warming, the soil and weathering processes accelerate, so the soil develops more, that the greening patterns can be quite quickly enhanced, which is not really projected yet a lot. And another factor which promotes this greening is also the increasing introduction of non-native species. So for example, on this picture, you can see the two non-native species, Barbaria vulgaris and Achillea medifolium, which you might know because they're native here in Switzerland, but in the high Arctic, they're non-native. But what we could see is that they are currently spreading a lot in Svalbard, in a settlement there, and they also start to spread outside the settlement areas into the undisturbed tundra. And of course, the introduction of those species can change competition patterns a lot and could also risk the suppression of highly specialized native species. Why we tested in a climate chamber experiment here at ETH the competition responses of native and non-native species. And what we could show is on the one hand that non-native species are suppressed by some generalist tundra species. But for example, the specialist tundra species Silena acaulis, that you might also know here from Switzerland, does not affect the non-native species at all. And also that nitrogen addition, for example, has a higher impact on the competition outcomes than warming alone. So we're still in the analysis here, but if you want to stay in touch, you can scan the QR code, then you will come to our new published database. And we have also a blog post series with Swiss info about our first field season. And of course, you can also just come to me and we can have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. We welcome Lisa, and the next is Maurice.
Hello, everyone. I think that in the current community, I don't have to empathize again on the events that are happening more rapidly, like Blatten. And unfortunately, these events, they cannot be absolutely for sure stopped. But when we take the cable car, we want to be in safe environment. And the cable car can base on the permafrost, on the mountain permafrost, and for making it safe and secure and protected, this infrastructure, we need the thermal stabilization system. Unfortunately, nowadays, these thermal stabilization systems, they are getting less and less efficient due to the climate change. That's why me and my group, we came with some solution which can combine the active cooling in the ground on the near surface together with shading from solar radiation with solar panels. And these solar panels also power the cooling system, which makes it autonomous and also sustainable due to the renewable energy use. So first, before bringing it into life and testing it in life, you have to do the model. So for modeling, we have chosen Schildhorn site in Bernese Alps, and we showed that after 16 years of exploitation, the active layer, if it has been implemented the system 16 years ago, from 5 meters, it could have been reduced up to several centimeters. So now when we proved that it's working in the model, we need to do the prototype. And we built the prototype, and now we are testing it outside in Sion. So before that, of course, we tested it in the lab environment, and it could have been seen that there is a barrier layer created by the cooling system, which does not let the heat penetrate through it and extracting the heat from the ground. And then we did the outdoors experiments, which were also quite efficient, and it showed that even in this extreme environment, like Sion, which is not the mountain environment, it's much warmer and there is much more solar radiation, it was comparable, the energy that we sent for cooling and the energy that we get from the solar panels. And now the next step would be bringing it to the real installation, to the mountains, and to do it on the pilot installation somewhere at the cable car. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lisa. Maurice, and next is Ruzica.
Hello, everyone. First up, my affiliations keep changing. So I'm Maurice. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of New South Wales and the Australian Centre for Excellence in Antarctic Science. And I thought it would be a nice opportunity to highlight some Antarctic science today. So I'd like to quickly present some few results from one of my studies on the subsurface warming of West Antarctica during El Niño. And the cool thing about this study is you don't actually need to read the paper. The title is okay. So what we have during El Niño is additional warming on the West Antarctic continental shelf. And this warming can lead to increased basal melting of the ice shelves, leading to sea level rise. So we know that West Antarctica has had a few big changes, and this is due to anthropogenic climate change and also natural climate variability. But with conventional observations, we can't kind of disentangle the two drivers. So we're using a modeling approach in this study. And from a satellite observation study, we also know that during El Niño, the height of the Pacific sector ice shelves increases, but their overall mass decreases. And how this works is during El Niño, we have more snowfall on top of the ice shelves, so a height increase, but at the same time, we have more warm circumpolar deep water coming onto the shelf and leading to basal melting of the ice shelves from below. So a height increase due to snowfall, but an overall mass loss due to melting from below. And so the big questions are, how exactly is this additional warm water coming to the base of the ice shelves during El Niño, and what happens during La Niña events? And so we're using a global ocean sea ice model with a 1/10 degree configuration, and we are applying some El Niño, La Niña forcing on top of the model and see how it reacts. So here on the left, you can see some atmospheric teleconnections during El Niño. During El Niño, we have kind of this shift of the Walker circulation from the western to the central equatorial Pacific. That excites a Rossby wave train that travels all the way down to Antarctica and manifests as a weakening of the Amundsen sea low. The Amundsen sea low is a low-pressure system, and if we add positive anomalies on top, it gets weaker. And then associated with these sea level pressure anomalies are also anomalies from the surface winds. And we expect these wind anomalies to have quite an impact on the shelf circulation and the transport of warm circumpolar deep water to the ice shelf cavities. And that brings me to my summary schematic. With the satellite observation study, we saw that during El Niño, we have a height increase of the Pacific sector ice shelves, but an overall mass loss, so thinner ice shelves. But with the satellite observations, we can't look into the ocean's interior. So that's where I came in with my ocean sea ice model. And we showed that during El Niño, we have weakened coastal easterlies, and they drive less Ekman transport towards the continental shelf. So that kind of creates a tilt in the sea level. I hope you can see this. I don't. And because I'm standing too close to the slide. And so there's this mass deficit on the shelf, and then we have this upwelling of more warm circumpolar deep water through the canyons towards the ice shelf cavities. And so the bottom Ekman flow is super important. Eddies can also transport heat towards the continental shelf. And also we see a stronger Amundsen Sea undercurrent, which can bring more warm water towards the continental shelf. And we also see some changes in the sea ice during El Niño. We have less sea ice in West Antarctica. And I put a penguin there because I like penguins. And only afterwards did I realize that, oh, the sea ice is actually super important for penguins. They build their colonies on there, and if we have less sea ice during El Niño, then the breeding success of penguins might decline in the future. So yeah, that's been my 5-minute talk. And if you want to know more about ocean sea ice modeling, ocean heat content, or the Antarctic shelf circulation, I'd love if you connect with me on LinkedIn or on this butterfly here. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. We welcome Ruzica, and next one is going to be Monika.
Okay, so I get the really nice talk. I'm not going to talk about science because we just came back from the field. 2 days ago, we just, Michi, Matthias, and I just spent 2 months on the Polarstern in the Arctic Ocean. And Michi, who's on your left, also got funding from a Polar Access Grant from SPI to support him during this voyage. And I'm just going to show you a few pictures of what we did, because with a very good conscience, I can say we don't have any results yet. So what we did, so the idea of contrast of this expedition was to look at contrasting of Arctic sea ice regimes during the melt season. And it's one part that we kind of missed during the Mosaic expedition. Most of you probably heard about the Mosaic expeditions, and we really wanted to go and have a look how does the sea ice melt progress also in different types of sea ice. So we looked at the sea ice that came kind of from the Russian shelf, the sea ice that came via the Arctic drift, like the Mosaic ice, and we also looked at the ice that was north of Greenland that was supposedly some very old ice. So this is obviously us. If you know us at the SLF, we do snow, so we measured some snow. However, in the Arctic in summer, we didn't always have snow. This is Matthias measuring this melting sea ice, so we can do that as well. And because only measuring snow doesn't give us all the information, so we went and measured some turbulent fluxes. If you look at this in the back, you can see 2 You can see one, but trust me, there were 2 turbulence towers. And Michi, for this project, actually looked at the heat advection between the ocean and the sea ice. Sometimes we got a little bit too motivated, went too close to the ice. This has happened. We didn't lose any instruments. And then what we also did, so we measured these things on the ice surface, but then we try to interpret them using satellites, and we run into real scale problems. So what we do, we use drones. This is a drone that measures the albedo. The image from the camera is from a VR 3D camera, which is why it looks so cool. But we essentially go with the drone and look at different heights and also try to match that with the ocean transmissivity ROVs that are below the ocean. So what we did in the end, I always look here, I should look there, but my eyes are not that good. But in the end, we visited three stations 4 times of these different sea ice properties. And there you can see these are these 3 stations in the red. And following on this discussion from this morning, after station 1B, we lost our station, drifted to Russian waters. So we couldn't go back. We had to wait for that station to come back, but by the time the station had come back, it had dissolved into about a gazillion pieces, and essentially everything was broken, but we could still recover it. But a few years ago, we could have gone into these Russian waters, but this time we could just go within 5 miles of what the 35 was, and we could not go further on. So we got a new station 1, but that old station 1, we really literally had to wait for it to come back. And there on the left, it's the scientists that were on board. It was about 50 scientists. And so we did our thing, but then it was a really collaborative effort. We worked a lot with remote sensing people and with people who work with the ocean and with ecosystem people. And it was a really nice collaborative effort. And thanks again for SPI for especially allowing Michi to go and come on this amazing expedition with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Monika. Next is Marius.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monika Maslikowska. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Zurich. And my research was kind of on a meta level because I was researching the researchers. We were probably the only social scientists and qualitative researchers in Antarctica this summer, Antarctic summer season. So thanks to the SPI grant, among other supporting organizations, I was able to go to Antarctica in January for over a month. We together with a collaborator, Andres Causar, and my team composed also of Professor Jan Schmutz and Pedro Marquez Quintero and Lily Charlotte Lehmeyer. We've been now analyzing almost 100 interviews that we collected in Antarctica. We spent there around a month. In King George Island, we traveled between the research stations. So we spent, we collected data or spent time or visited 7 research stations. First in Actowski, the Polish base. I'm also Polish, so we were welcomed really warmly there and probably collected one of the most enriching data that we could have hoped for. And then we moved also to Escudero, and from there we, thanks to the support of multiple organizations and vessels, we were traveling to visit other stations to collect also observations, pictures, videos, and most importantly, interviews. So, and yeah, now we have to deal with all that data. We didn't expect there to be so much in the beginning. We were actually, everyone was a little bit skeptical because when they found out there were some psychologists coming to study their collaboration, they were a little bit worried if we were not going to share the information with their organizations or bosses. But once we gained trust, we actually reached this perfect line where between being close enough to for them to trust us, but not too close, so they would think we were too biased or we would share personal information with other parties. I actually ran 2 studies there. The main one was on collaboration between the research stations. We were trying to understand, so basically the Antarctic collaborations among researchers, but also generally between the research stations are complicated. On the one hand, there is a strong need for collaboration. On the other, there's also a little bit of competition for resources and some political tensions as well. So we wanted to understand how those teams can collaborate better through the so-called boundary spanning for better sustainability, but not only the environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability among and peaceful interactions on the international level. And the second one was second study was on extreme couples. So we met some people that are not only research collaborators, but also life partners. And that was also a very interesting aspect of this expedition. So yeah, we also got support from other organizations that help us, SCAR, Propolar, that help us travel, Arctowski, the IBB PAN, the Polish polar organization that hosted us. Switzerland doesn't have a base there, so thanks to the SPI grant, we could go there. Thanks to the Polish support, we could be hosted. The same with the Chilean and the Portuguese support to get transportation and place. URAM to help us now process this huge amount of data that we collected, and SCAR for my collaborator Anders to accompany me. So thank you so much to all these organizations. Without you, and especially the SPI, this wouldn't have been possible. And now I hope you will be able to see our research published soon in some of the top social science journals. Thank you.
We welcome Marius, and next is Laureen.
Okay, so hi, my name is Marius. I work at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences in Winterthur, not so far from here. And this work is actually based on work that was done here at the ETH Zurich and also at the University of Zurich. And what the colleagues did is they mixed water with phytantriol a few years ago. And if you do that, you get something called a mesophase, which has some quite remarkable properties in that it stays in a liquid-like state down to temperatures of about minus 120 degrees centigrade. So since you have that, you can actually treat this like a regular liquid, more or less, and you can pump it in hydraulic networks. So we had a commercial partner, Syrian Orbital Systems of Zurich, who approached us and said, hey, can we not use this to design something like a water storage and supply system for a lunar base? So it will be extraterrestrial applications. So we started work on this based on a European Space Agency contract, but then quickly realized that this is not the only application, and we have quite a few applications here on Earth as well. One is shown here in an AI picture. So this will be a water storage and supply system for cold regions on Earth, for example, above the Arctic Circle. And this is actually not an easy feat to do. Villages that are located up there, a lot of times they would have canisters, ponds in-house for the water supply. Then you get bacterial growth, people get sick because of this, or you try and build some installations outside and you have some piping systems. You need to insulate them, you need to heat them, sometimes you need to bury them, which is difficult in permafrost. Same applies to the tank, a lot of heating required. So we believe if you use the mixture of phytantriol and water, then you can circumvent or perhaps solve some of these problems. So in a first step, we tried to scale up the enrichment process, so the production of this mesophase, from small lab scales of about 50 milliliters, still in a batch process, up to about 500 milliliters. So that was okay. And then we tried to extract the water from that mesophase, which of course is the whole point of the exercise. We extracted it by using distillation. Now the problem with this is distillation is a very energy intensive process. So we finished the ESA research and we approached the SPI 2 years ago. Actually, we presented this the first time back then with the state back then. So we applied for a Technogrant, and thank you very much. We were granted the Technogrant. Appreciate this. And the topic is that we would like to have a look if there are not other energetically more favorable methods to extract the water from the mesophase. So we did this, and the first method that we tried is pervaporation, and this is really results that came in about 2 weeks ago. So schematically, pervaporation is shown here in the center. And what that does, basically, it circulates the mesophase through some system, and it passes by through a vessel. In that vessel, you have a membrane, and on the other side of the membrane, you have a vacuum or vacuum-like conditions. Now, if you do that, then this allows the water to evaporate from the mesophase, and on the vacuum side, you can recollect it for further use. The process is dependent on the process temperatures, process pressures, and actually on the structure of this membrane. So the preliminary results that we have, as I said, they were just about 2 weeks old. The curves show you the water content in the mesophase as a function of time. And the bars, they show you the water flux out of the mesophase at different points in time. The different colors represent different temperatures, and I think clearly you see that for higher temperatures you get quicker water extraction. But of course, higher temperatures are also associated with a bit more energy consumption, right? Heat losses to the environment. So we did not know whether we could actually extract the water from the mesophase using pervaporation. So this we showed that it is actually possible, but we want to go a step further and try nanofiltration, which is a third process, hopefully a bit energetically even more favorable. And then by the end of January, when the project finishes, we plan to have a comparison in place in terms of energy and select one process that is energetically most favorable to continue the research on that. So thanks again for the sponsoring, and that's it.
Thank you. Laureen is coming, and next one is Vali.
Hey, I'm Laureen. Maybe you remember me from the Apex presentation this morning. I'm a PhD student at EPFL in Valais. And I want to tell you about my PhD project, about microbes in the mountains and what role they play with greenhouse gas fluxes. So CO2 and methane are important greenhouse gases. And soil microorganisms are key players in the soil carbon turnover. So as you see in this figure, CO2 is taken up into the soil by plants, and then it's either stored in the soil by the microorganisms or through microbial respiration released back to the atmosphere. For methane, this is a more direct process, so the soil microorganisms can directly take up methane at atmospheric concentrations and turn it into less harmful CO2. So to summarize, soils are capable of releasing carbon dioxide, but they can take up methane and remove it from the atmosphere. Now in our warming world, as we have increasing temperatures, this also increases the activity of soil microorganisms, which then produce more CO2, which leads to higher CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, and then through radiative forcing, higher temperatures. So with CO2 and microbial activity, we have a positive feedback loop. It is currently unknown, though, how those warming temperatures affect methane uptake, and it is also unknown how this greenhouse gas fluxes are in our alpine soils. So we can summarize that warming might amplify CO2 emissions from soils, but we don't know what the methane response is. So what we do, we look at 4 sites in Switzerland, in the Valais at 3,000 meters altitude, and a vegetation gradient from very rocky soil to slightly vegetated soil. So here we have our 4 sites across the vegetation gradients and the temperatures over the seasons. So if we use seasonal warming here with warmest temperatures in the summer and look at CO2 emissions, so we have positive values here or close to 0 values in the 4 sites, and we see that we have in the higher vegetated soils, we also have higher CO2 emission, so on the right side. And then we see that this nicely follows the temperature pattern as well, where we have higher CO2 emissions in the summers, where the temperature is usually warmer. And if we now look at the methane uptake, so here the values are negative because it's removed from the atmosphere and taken up into the soil. We again see that the non-vegetated soils have a very weak activity because they also have a lower biomass. And then if we try to look at the seasonal pattern here, so the dots in the middle might have a slightly stronger uptake in the summer than in the shoulder seasons. So it seems that warming temperatures cause higher CO2 emissions in these alpine soils, but also a stronger methane uptake from the atmosphere. So I did not mention anything about microbiology yet, but if you are interested in this, how the microbes relate to the seasonal warming and the greenhouse gas fluxes, then please come and talk to me. And that's what you can see as well in the picture there is an open top chamber, and this is how we try to simulate warming, so a warmer future. And we do similar measurements in there too. So yeah, if you have any questions, I would be very happy to share our other results. Thank you.
We welcome Vali, and next one is going to be Melanie.
Merci. Good afternoon. My name is Valentin, or Vali Künzler, and I'm a master's thesis student here at ETH. I'm talking today to you on behalf of Landa van Tricht, who is my master thesis supervisor, and with ETH ZHAW glaciology, and also project manager of Mitica, which is a SPI Polar Access Fund, very generously funded project. And I learned the SPI Polar Access Fund is in turn funded by BNP Paribas, so also thanks for that. We just returned from fieldwork in Central Asia, like Martina also earlier. And more specifically, we were in Kyrgyzstan, in just south of the Issyk-Kul Lake, which is also 70 times the size of Lake Zurich, 7-0, again, not 1-7, like earlier this morning, on the Arabelle Plateau. So the Arabelle Plateau is the not blue part in the middle of the map you see up here. And the plateau itself is already on an altitude of 3,500 meters, more or less. And if you imagine standing on the plateau and taking a look around, what you would see is not a lecture hall, but is actually mountains on the horizon nearly everywhere framing this plateau. And most of those mountains, as you can see on this Randolph Glacier Inventory map, are also capped, also have glaciers, and some of them are even capped by glaciers. But what you would also see maybe is are human traces. So you might see a yurt of a nomad. And if you look in one particular direction, what you see is also a huge mining operation. That is the open pit mine of Kumtor. What does that look like? This is a drone image from just a month ago. And what you see is a mining pit of a diameter of a couple of kilometers. And then the back, there's the plateau. And the pit itself is about 400 meters of depth. So it's really huge. And these streets are where those huge mining trucks are driving. Some of them are down here, and each one of them is the size of this lecture hall. So it's really huge. And what's even more special about this mine is that it's in direct contact with some glaciers, and then in quasi-direct contact also with glaciers to the left and up there. And these glaciers are special, not just because they dig it away because they're scared that it might flow into their pit, but also because those glaciers, they have a more negative mass balance than models predict that are otherwise quite accurate for this region. So Lander hypothesized, and that is the ground of this project, that there is dust deposition from the heavy mining operations through the air onto the glacier surface that thereby lowers the albedo, meaning there is a higher uptake of solar radiation, and affiliated to that, a more negative mass balance, quicker melt. Now, what we did to investigate that just 2 weeks ago, when we were there, is we surveyed glaciers. We surveyed glaciers in the vicinity of the mine, but then also a bit further away. And from the data we collected there, that I cannot show you yet because there is no analysis done yet, we plan to investigate the hypothesis. What data did we collect? That is, as a first thing, those are DEMs, digital elevation models, and orthomosaics using drones. So that is basically a 3D map of the whole glacier down to the accuracy of a few centimeters. And part of this we also did with a multispectral camera, meaning we will try to use the information we got to classify the surface, or also to investigate the albedo. And then to complement that, we collected point-wise surface albedo values using a handheld albedometer, and we took material samples of whatever we would find on the glacier surface, and we're going to do a geochemical analysis and compare what we find there with the mineralogic composition that is stated in publicly available information about surveys of the mine. And that is a bit of an open investigation. It's also not directly part of our expertise, so I already had and hope to have more insightful conversations with the geology experts in the room later. And one more funny anecdote is when we were in the mine, in the canteen in the evening, there's something funny happened. We heard Swiss German, and turns out there were researchers from University of Zurich, medical researchers investigating high mountain sickness, but I haven't seen anyone in the room. Maybe they need to come next year. Thank you.
And we welcome Melanie.
Thank you very much. So I'll be spending the next 5 minutes talking about sea ice in wintertime in McMurdo Sound and how it's impacted by the atmosphere. And first, I'll help you orient yourselves a little bit. So McMurdo Sound is a really small bay, actually, in the western part of the Ross Sea. It is bounded by mountains to the west and south of it, and then Ross Island just to the east. So if we zoom into that area, it looks like this. And the satellite image actually really nicely also shows the different types of sea ice that we can find in McMurdo Sound. So on the one hand, we have pack ice. Pack ice is made up of freely floating ice floes. And the other type of sea ice is called fast ice. It's called that because it is land fast, meaning it's attached to the land. It's kind of like fasten your seatbelt. What we also nicely see in this image is a little bit of open water just between these two types of sea ice, and that's what we call a polynya. Now, polynyas can freeze over, but if there are strong winds or waves, they can break up the sea ice, and if in the case of McMurdo Sound, we have strong winds coming from a southerly direction, these winds can actually blow the sea ice out to sea. So this is kind of what that process could look like, and we call this a breakout event. Now, today I want to talk about the research that I've conducted in the past year, and specifically I wanted to understand what processes in the large-scale atmosphere could cause these breakout events. And I already told you that the breakout events are due to strong southerly winds, but really what's happening in the atmosphere to cause these winds? And where are these winds coming from, actually? So that's what I'm showing you in this plot here. The outline in black is the Antarctic continent, and then the shaded colors are telling you where air masses came from or which grid points they passed through on their way to McMurdo Sound. And this is on a normal day, so a day where nothing is happening to the sea ice. And if we have brighter colors, it means that more of these air parcels pass through that grid point. And here you see a more or less isotropic pattern, meaning these air masses come from all directions. And if we compare that to what the air masses are doing leading up to a breakout event, or really where the winds are coming from when we have a breakout event in McMurdo Sound, it looks like this. And we see a very clear pattern that is very clearly different from our normal days. So for starters, these air parcels come from much further away. A lot of them cross the entire West Antarctic ice sheet, or they come from the lower latitudes, which you can see in the gray shading that just extends a lot further radially. But then obviously most interesting is this really strong red band that we have along the Transantarctic Mountains, which is this really steep mountain range that ranges 2 to 3 kilometers up from the Ross Ice Shelf. I wanted to know, why do these patterns look so different? And really, what is it in the large-scale atmosphere that is forcing these air parcels to travel along the Transantarctic Mountains? And what I found was that for every one of these breakout events, we have a cyclone in the eastern part of the Ross Sea. So in this image, I'm showing you the same region of Antarctica, and I'm showing you the cyclone frequency. And essentially, it's how often do we observe a cyclone in a very specific grid point. And you will see highlighted in the box a maximum in the Ross Sea. So this is the cyclone frequency for a 12-year time period from 2013 to 2024 for the extended winter months, so from April to August. And yeah, you'll see that there are a lot of cyclones there. Does every one of these cyclones cause a breakout event? No. But if I look at how many cyclones I have on average every year by looking at the average cyclone frequency and comparing that to the number of breakout events I observe in McMurdo Sound, I see a correlation of greater than 80%. So there's a very clear message here that if we have more cyclones in the eastern part of the Ross Sea, then we will have more breakout events in McMurdo Sound. Now, in the 12-year period that I looked at, I did not find any significant trends. But the research does suggest that with a changing climate, there will be more cyclones in the Ross Sea. And it's interesting to think about the implications that this has for sea ice in McMurdo Sound. So if you're interested in discussing that, or really anything else I mentioned in my talk today, then please come and approach me later at the Apple. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.